At the time we're recording this, soccer fans from every corner of the planet have come to North America for the World Cup, played across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and right here in New York City. In a matter of days, Americans will mark Independence Day, and this year it carries extra weight. It is the country's 250th birthday. The eyes of the world will be upon us. The question worth asking is not whether America is perfect, it's whether the people entrusted with power are living up to what this country says it believes, and our journalists, are they holding them accountable? I'm Richard Schreiber. Welcome to True Journalism.
Yeah, thanks,
Tom?
Richard. Yeah, thank you. Tom Martin here. And I have my jersey as well. I'm rooting for Messi. I'm going Friday night. College betting from Argentina. I'm getting in the World Cup spirit here. So, but as you say, this is true journalism. That's our focus here, and we have a great episode for you today. I think you're going to love it. And when I think about this country on the 4th of July coming up, as the time we're recording this, a couple of days from now, I think about Charles Kuralt. Charles Kuralt. I still think of him as my mentor at CBS News, and he spent a career on the back roads on the segments he called On the Road, which were often featured on Walter Cronkite's CBS Evening News, because he believed that the best of America was not in the halls of power. It was in ordinary people. I had the privilege of helping him a little on his book, Charles Kuralt's America. I showed you there. The publisher asked him to spend 12 months, each month in one of his favorite unique American places, Charleston, New Orleans, Boothbay Harbor, interesting places. I encouraged him to spend a month in Key West, which is a town that I love. And so I introduced him to some friends there and so on. It was a great chapter. Highly recommend the book. Charles passed away on the 4th of July in 1997, 29 years ago. Some viewers may not even remember Charles, which is sad. But 29 years later, the date still reads like a fitting close for a man who spent his life celebrating this country and its people. And Charles was genial, he was hopeful, but he was never complacent. He believed the press had one job that never changed, no matter who held office: watch power. Mind the gap between what leaders say and what they do. That is the watchdog role, and it belongs to the public.
The Freedom 250 concert series, 16 days of music on the national law, was built for this moment. Instead, organizers canceled it after the headliners walked, among them Martina McBride, Bret Michaels, and one of my favorite bands, the Commodores, over the event's shifting partisan character. So a celebration of America came apart under the very pressures this show exists to watch. Which brings us to our guest, Tom.
Yeah, no, I'm very honored. Dear friend of mine, we've known each other something like 30 plus years now. But our guest today is a dear friend and someone whose career reads like a map of modern network news. Rich Diefenbach and I were at CBS News in the same years, from 1989 into the mid-1990s, which means we remember the same long nights and the same deadlines, same breaking news stories. He ran news operations at ABC News before that, covering the revolution that swept Eastern Europe in 1989. Certainly remember the wall coming down. He spent years at Fox News, where he built the assignment desk, and then returned to ABC for World News with Peter Jennings and Nightline with Ted Koppel. He was in the control room during the O.J. Simpson trial coverage, which I remember so well. He was also there for the Oklahoma City bombing, the September 11th tragedy, the places the audience never sees. And today he produces award-winning documentary film, and he has spent years in the classroom teaching young people how the craft is done. If anyone can tell us what happens to the work when the ownership changes and the pressure rises, it's Rich. So Rich, welcome to True Journalism.
Oh, thank you very much. It's very nice to meet both of you, and nice to see you, Tom.
Thank you.
What I wanted to talk about today, about especially is our 4th of July. I've never been more optimistic about our government, our country, and I've always focused on that.
We love that.
Yeah, that's great.
I won't go into great detail, but as I was planning our show for today, I was really thinking about that watchdog role of the press. I think that's very important. And again, as we prepare each of these shows, we notice what's in the headlines, what are the different news media outlets covering. And certainly, I think at this moment, the watchdog role is even more important. But again, we described Rich's background here. And Richard, why don't we just jump right in?
I think that the role of the government is very important to protect the citizens of America. And the fourth estate, which is the role of the media and journalism, is to really keep an eye on what government does. Is government doing the right thing? Are we getting the truth unvarnished from them? Are we getting full disclosure? What do we need to know? And the journalists need to ask those tough questions, and not a gotcha question, a question that's going to get information that's going to be answering our questions. And I think I was listening to Bill Maher the other day, and he was talking about, do I give a punch in the face type question, or do I ask a question that is going to result in an answer? And that's what, in my role as a producer, when I was in network news, I always asked questions that got a result, got an answer, even when they were dodging it. I remember going after Mario Cuomo one time on the whole issue of 3 strikes, you're out on healthcare and types of benefits that they were receiving. And he dodged it. And then I gave him an example of a woman who works all the time but can't afford to pay for her children's childcare. It's and give a real point to that person that you're interviewing, a real example, and get them to give you a response that's accurate and truthful. That's what our job is, not to attack, poke the pig, do whatever we need to do to get a response, or follow somebody who's always attention seeking. We got to make sure we're making the right choices in our coverage of news so that we're not placating to someone who's trying to get attention, but getting responses to questions that we really care about as Americans. Like, how are we going to afford to fill our gas tanks this week? Or how are we going to pay our rent or our mortgages? Are we better off? How can we make ourselves better off? How can you take care of us better, government? That's what we should be asking, those questions, and finding ways to get real people to talk about their real problems and try to find real solutions. We should be problem solvers in a way, as journalists. Just as I taught as a history teacher, we give them real examples, real questions, and ask them to try to find answers to those by doing research and looking at history, but also looking at today. What can we do, thinking out of the box to resolve that issue? That's what we should be doing.
Yeah. You mentioned that your background as a history teacher. I think that really has solidified that position in your mind, that reporting the facts, understanding the context, understanding how things played out and what we can learn from it. It all gets baked into how we can uncover the story.
Yeah, I think we really need to keep ourselves knowledgeable about the workings of government and not go in ignorant, because then we ask questions that are very shallow but we're maybe getting a reaction type soundbite, but we're not getting an answer. And my whole house is filled with history. If you look behind me, my grandfather and his ferry company, I see Reagan over on the left. There's just history. I have all these great speeches of TR and being in the arena. You have to be in the arena, but if you're in the arena, you better be responsible and ask the right questions and try to make government accountable, but get them to see what the problems are and get them to react to them. But we're too often, I see two political rivals going at each other, screaming on a screen, and it's not resulting in any accomplishments that are going to help our American people. People turn off the TV. That's why they go look at their phones. They want to see something, just tidbits of information that's only part of what they need to know, because they need to dig deeper. And I'm afraid AI is only making it easier for them to be spoon-fed partial information and not allowing them to dig deeper and be curious into finding the why behind all of these problems.
And what AI also does is it understands your tendencies. It knows where you've been, what you follow, what you watch. So it could provide you with information that's consistent with your beliefs and values instead of what the facts truly are, so that you can be enlightened and open-minded. I remember growing up reading the New York Times in high school in the 70s, William Safire, some of their well-known authors. It was about really understanding all sides of the issue. And journalists then were almost intellectuals in a sense, that they did their research, investigative reporting, obviously in the 70s with Nixon, Watergate, and beyond.
And we have a place in it. And that's exactly right. If you walk around thinking that you're in a bubble and you're not going to have an impact on what happens every day, you're living in a world that's not very rich. It's not helpful, and it's not participating in what you can do to really change things. I read the New Yorker, I read the Times. I went through the Times. There was a big article this weekend about the wall of presidents that are along the colonnade at the White House and how the president perceives of historical presidents. And I like the fact that historians weighed in on some of them. Some of them I agreed with, some of them I didn't. Some of them I thought the president was dead on. Some of them I thought that it was off the track. But at least that kind of information I think is important, because if you were just walking down that colonnade as a visitor, you would need to have that extra information. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be informed. And I like what you said, Richard, about understanding all the different sides. If you're going to teach about Hitler, you better know what Mein Kampf said. It's scary, and you could be accused of being somebody that you're not, but you have to be informed. You have to knock down those terrible things that were absorbed and understand the couch language that was in I remember seeing this. You remember when the Ku Klux Klan was trying to recruit people? The recruitment document mentioned nothing about cross burning or any of those things. And so you could have just easily been pulled in. But if you got into the language and all of the other details that really meant what their intention was, you were informed, and then you could see and eventually eradicate that kind of language and thought processes.
Yeah. Fascinating point, because yes, I see that.
I always talk about Cronkite in my classes because I always have him communicate his decision after coming back from Vietnam and his famous, but it was so eloquent, so balanced, so fair, and nobody could argue with it because it was truthful and loaded with great information. Anyone that has that information today that fills me with good details, and I feel like, wow, they really did their homework. They looked at both sides of that issue, and they were really able to communicate a good argument why that other side is not the best side to embrace, and what little things we can do every day to knock down what may be a bad argument or not a healthy argument or healthy experience for America. And we just have to, in our way, communicate and not talk down or try to dismiss a viewpoint. People have a reason for why they believe what they do. And you have to try to create an environment that helps them understand that love and inclusiveness is really more important than anger and hate. Those are things that we can help in our own way as journalists communicate. But if we leave the page and we're bombastic and disrespectful or hateful in our language, or just are trying to get people to react to it, it's egotistical and selfish. It really is. So any journalist that does a responsible job in reporting a story is somebody I look up to and admire and want to tune into.
What you're talking about, well said. What you're talking about now reminds me, and maybe not a major incident in history, but something that resonated with me because it happened in Connecticut. And I know one of the people directly affected, but is the Newtown shooting, the Sandy Hook school shooting. And I met a mom who lost her little 6-year-old son. I met her just a couple months after that. She wrote a book about that. And again, that was exactly the message that she carried forward as a legacy for her little son, Jesse Lewis. We can all choose love and forgiveness rather than hate and anger. But I remember, I think it was even within hours of that terrible incident, and some people I know saw the hundreds of police cars racing to the school. It's like unimaginable, really, as a parent, to through something like that. But
When that happened, Tom, I was an 8th grade school teacher in
oh wow,
Chappaqua. And it was going on while we were in school.
yeah,
We sat in around and we just talked about how this was a misguided person, and it was difficult. I let them talk a lot, what was going on in their feelings, and do they feel safe? And I said, "You're safe here. I just want you to know."
yeah,
And allow them to kind of communicate what was going on.
Yeah.
Yes. Just an amazing piece. But again, it allowed those people who really were part of the story to be vocal about their feelings and to see visually the loss. I mean, and I think when you can communicate in a way that's effective because it has multi-sensory pieces to it, that's how you want to be as a teacher. You want it to be multi-sensory so that the students can take it in and feel it and are empathetic to it.
Rich, was that the same thing that you experienced? Were you in the classroom when 9/11 happened?
When 9/11 happened, I was a senior producer in charge of tape and graphics at Fox News Channel.
Wow.
And we were all in the editorial room. I had been the assignment manager there for 3 years. And then I just typically a burnout job running a news desk for a 24-hour news channel. And I had done it for 15 years and I really wanted a change. So like tape and graphics is going to be a change. But at least I didn't have to move troops in the field like the desk does, which takes your head off editorial. So I was just focusing on whether the images were appropriate and how we were going to get them on the air quickly. And I sat down with my team that day when 9/11 happened. We were all in shock. Obviously, we didn't know what to do. So much of our feelings were directed on how can we do something helpful? How can we be down there at that site and try to save people? We wanted to do that. Many of journalists and even journalists who left the business went into some kind of position or job that really did try to help. So I do believe on that day, I had to sit down eventually and talk to my team. I had about, at least 100 of people that were moving around. And I had to just remind them that their job was to be a storyteller and to tell the story of this terrible tragedy that happened in 3 different cities. I really needed them to be on the ball, to be responsible and diligent in making sure that we were using images and interviews responsibly, and that if there was anything that they had that was concerning, I wanted to see it. I had to really be the last place before anything went on the air, which was a huge amount of responsibility. And I still look back on some of those images we didn't get on the air, which shouldn't have been on the air or weren't ready. People weren't ready to see those. And maybe later on we used them in a way that was responsible. But I remember there was a call down from the control and from I think the second floor, which is the executive floor, saying, let's not run that plane into the building again. That was something that we didn't want to run. I stopped it. I pulled it out of the deck. That's what we had to do because we needed time to catch up and we didn't want to keep being reminded of that terrible image. And I had to, anyone that was falling out of a building, I had to be careful about how that was running. And it was so much raw material coming in all at one time, and to catch it all, it's extraordinary for anyone to intake. And I think back on it, and I've talked about this in my classes, and it was a very difficult day. I didn't have a lot of clothes because my clothes were back at home, and my wife wasn't able to get into the city. So I just wore first responder shirts for every day in the editorial meeting because I couldn't go down there and be a first responder. So my first responder responsibility was to be a journalist that had integrity and responsible role in helping to tell the story of this terrible tragedy of 9/11.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from you, Rich, people that watch this podcast and listen to this podcast. I think span a spectrum, maybe just consumers of the news who want to learn a little bit more, go a little bit deeper, or concerned about how things are today. But you're in a rather unique position, having worked for ABC and CBS and Fox, and at a time when some people are like leaving a network, they're taking a stand. I don't like the direction this is going. We talked about the role of money in news organizations. And I think people like Anderson Cooper, Paula Reid at CNN, CNN said, I'm not going to be renewing my contract. I see what's coming. It's like, what role does the ownership of a news organization have on the people that do the work? I was just curious what your experience has been.
let me just talk about the people that are inside right now
Yeah.
of this organization. And I think we touched on this yesterday in a brief conversation, Tom, and that's we have a lot of friends that are still working in news and are still working for CBS and are still in the fabric of that place and are in responsible roles. They know deep in their heart, they have integrity. Some of them ones that I know that are there, and they're going to work hard to make sure that they do the right thing. So even if that means just being in the organization and working through the kinks of this new management and being able to get to a place that they believe is responsible. They have that backbone of integrity. Some of them do. And I believe that I can see this through. And I won't mention their names, but I worked with them. I loved working with them. It was a real pleasure. When people roll up their sleeves on breaking news, there's no greater friend or greater colleague because we really do watch out for each other. I was just thinking of Lane Bernardos, who I worked with at CBS, and Dan Rather, and all the people that I worked with that really rolled up their sleeves and got involved. And I know that there's people still there. Now, well, how do I feel about those people that have left or spoken out? Each person has a different personality. Each person has a breaking point. If they believe that they're not going to be able to survive in that environment, and it takes a lot of patience when you're trying to manage through that, or it's not easy. There's people like I'm looking, if scripts are being changed and you really believe that your script is the best written script and it's the most fair and the most truthful, it's going to be hard for you to give up that power to have somebody get into your script and make some changes. You just have to fight the good fight on that one if you want to stay. And then when it comes to organizations that purchase news, we went through how many changes when we were even there? We had Pelley owned us, owned us, and then another organization came in, Paramount. ABC, Leonard Goldenson was the leader when I came in there. And then Cap Cities came in, and then it was Disney. So you go through all of these different things. And I believe that what should not change is core journalism and the key components of it, which require news gathering. Fight hard for a story. Fight hard to get the facts for the story. Don't just fold up your tent and say, we couldn't get that, or that person didn't talk to me. I get that, but there's a part of me that just never gives up when it comes to getting the facts out. I really do believe that you have to be persistent and annoying, but you can do it in a way that can also be effective and use multi-strategies to get to your truth.
Yeah.
And that's what journalists have to do. Now, management, I'm going to talk about them. People that buy companies want profit. They have a board of directors they report to, and they're looking only at profit and losses. That's it. This particular person that just purchased both CBS, Viacom, and is now Time Warner, that's a big corporation. I would think there's going to be a number of changes. They'll get rid of some things. They'll keep some things, just like Comcast did. And we're going to see a lot of changes when it comes to what they're going to keep and what they're going to remove.
Yeah.
And I think enough pressure from within, even if it's quiet, can bring about a change, especially if you're getting ratings and you're doing the right thing. But I don't know. When I think about Leslie and I think about Bill and I think about people that have stayed at 60 and that they don't want 60 to go away, I get that. Fought for decades in that role and you don't want it to go away. So you're going to do everything you can to preserve it. And that's a good thing to think about. How do we keep journalism? We're going to fight for it. We're not going to budge on a story. We're going to keep as much as we can of the truth in the piece. We don't want to take stuff out. If there's room to add additional facts that might help communicate a story that's closer to the truth or fair, we have to be open to that. Yeah, we have to be thinking about, is that a legitimate point? And we have to take our ego down a little bit and say, okay, I get that, but let me let you know that I did check this, I did check that, and this is what I know. And that way you talk to the person that questioned it, and you've been prepared to answer questions, and then you can speak to the value of your piece. I mean, we've gone through script revisions all the time. It's like, or even story pitches.
Rich, I want to bring up the 800-pound elephant in the room, and that is the Scott Pelley situation, where he indicated back in February when he was covering the story, I think, that broke in Minneapolis, that he went out of his way, he said, perhaps at the impetus of someone within CBS News, to make sure that he researched all of the angles that were filmed to be 100% certain whether or not the woman who was indicated by, I think, the administration that she positioned her van in the direction of the ICE agent, and that's why he shot her. So Scott Pelley had them go through and saw the video a multitude of times, but then ultimately was asked, apparently, by Barry Weiss to see if he couldn't position the reporting in a way that was less demonstratively critical of ICE. And it was inferred that there was some political pressure. And today, that's the story, I think, that troubles.
But let's talk. No, I get that. And that's what kind of push and pull you're going to get from a corporate type that hasn't been in the trenches with you and doesn't really understand it as much as you do. So they're trying to put in a request to change that. And I don't really agree with that. I never did that with my reporters that were in the field. I really trusted them. And if I had an argument, I said, are you sure? Did you check this? Did you check that? And after that, if the response was appropriate, then I would just say, you know what? Go with what you have. Now, in that case, he didn't back down, right? I understand he didn't. If I remember the story, he didn't back down. He didn't
he
make that
ran the
change.
story the
He
way
stood
he
by that,
wrote
and
it.
that was good.
Yeah.
And that's where he held his ground. It's unfortunate that he decided to be vocal at that meeting in front of
he was venting.
He was venting, but that venting caused him to lose his job. It wasn't obviously he was upset and frustrated by the editorial pokes that he was getting from management, which he held his ground on. And absolutely, you do that. But it's unfortunate that he put himself in a situation where he was going to lose his job by speaking out like that at a meeting. But I love Scott Pelley. I think he's a great person. He's a great reporter. He's been responsible for many years in news. He's been in the trenches. I watched his entire interview that I believe the New York Times did. Was that true? I watched the whole thing. So I don't just speak here like I'm like naive and I got a brush stroke on it. No, I listened to the entire interview and I was really moved by his emotional connection to his colleagues, that they saved his life in the past. These were people that he cared about. And losing Bill Owens was viscerally painful for him. So I get that. And I know that maybe some people have a breaking point at some point. They just said, I just can't take this anymore. Like that movie. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. I get it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate his frustration. I don't think I can say anything more about it, but I'm respectful to him and I'm not in his shoes, so I can't judge him.
Of course.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my PR work that I do these days, I'm currently working with an author who wrote a book about communicating change. You have that topic. Change is constant. Any industry, any field, we know that, technology and so on. But are the leaders and the board of directors and so on communicating what's going on to the rank and file? And certainly, I think I was caught in 2 different layoffs at CBS News over the years. You must lay off 300 people. Just put 300 names on the list. This is not fair, but it's okay. And that's the way it works. It's okay. I think it's in their early days. I thought I was on track to be a lawyer, but I don't want to be a lawyer. I think I'll be a journalist. And I remember within the first couple of years, like, this is the choice that I made. I chose a path where there's not going to be a lot of stability necessarily. I know, I'm sure we both have friends who've been with the network news organization for 30 or 40 years, but otherwise you're kind of caught up in this. And I think in that Scott Pelley interview where you said, it's like the pain I feel is like losing a spouse. I invested my whole being.
On essence. Yeah.
It was just very interesting.
It is, and I felt that way when I left CBS, but I had an opportunity to run a news desk for a 24-hour news channel. I didn't care whether they said it was this direction or that direction politically. I always got my nuts and bolts correct. The information that I put on the air was, if it came on first, it was accurate. I didn't rely on the AP to give me the information. I told them the AP is going to be wrong many times. You just do your own original reporting And we would report before people know, how did you get that? I can't report. The anchors would say, oh, I'm not comfortable with that because I see on the AP they have this. As many as 16 dead. And you're saying there's 6 dead confirmed. I said, yes, because I heard that from the coroner. That's the source. So that's what we do. We do our original reporting. We go back to where we need to be and report it responsibly. And Tom, when you do that kind of passionate work for a long time, when you're gone or when you have to leave because your contract's very expensive and we can't justify that, or there's a whole level of management below you that you really train that can move up to your position, I'm afraid we're just going to have to, it's nothing personal. Honestly, we have to cut this amount of money, but we're going to have to let you go. And this is your package. It's not an easy thing to go through. And I went through it a couple of times, and it's not easy. And you feel it, you take it very personal. But you know what? You have to really understand yourself better. And you're not your job and your title. You're who you are and the work that you've done. Proud of that. And just proud of the efforts that you made. And that this is a punishing business, as someone once told me. And so you have to stay in there and hang in there and be as optimistic as you can, because as someone also said to me one time, I'm getting pecked away by a bunch of woodpeckers, because that's what that's what somebody who's writing a script is going to be pecked away by people on the outside.
Yes.
Saying, oh, are you sure that's right? They get that, or they.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, I sense the advocacy in your being, I think Tom and I both represent that as well. Tom and his PR work, and I run an autism foundation. And I want to talk about this wonderful documentary you did called Honorable But Broken. I was really taken aback that, 39 states don't even have that, or 36 states don't even have that as mandatory. These are life-threatening situations. And how did you come upon that story? And obviously it resonates and should with anybody because it's horrible. But
Give us more background on that.
Some of these things fall in our lap and we don't even acknowledge them sometimes. We brush it off, or we don't think we can do anything about it. This was a special project that came my way, and I had run into somebody that I sat on the board with for Historical Society in Chappaqua. And she said, this is really frustrating that these people are working multiple jobs and they're not considered essential. And she said, I want to work on something. And I said, listen, I have a camera. I can shoot. We can interview. We'll just take it one step at a time. And over time, this thing grew in momentum. I enlisted the help of the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians. I went to their conference down in Washington. We didn't have a budget at all. We didn't have funding. We were doing it through a website that could help us. And this film, the woman who's at the top of this film, I always call it's the face on the story, the person that we will remember and walk away with. If there's accountability in your watching this, what are you going to be accountable for once you finish watching this? I want them to be called to action. And so this woman is bookended in the front and back of the piece. I worked on getting her for months. She had a poor nurse. Her son was so caught up in his EMT. He had 5 clothing changes a day. All the calls that he went to, most of them were cardiac arrests. He could not do anything to save them, and he had to leave them. He couldn't take them to a hospital because there was no room in the hospital for people who had died. So it was a painful story. So when she called me and she said, I want to tell my story, I was just bowled over. And I tried to get the person who was working on the story with me to initially just go and do the interview. And she was thinking, I don't have any money. I can't do it. We're on this track. We've got a bunch of sound bites from different people talking about from different places. I said, we don't have the heart on this story. We don't have the face on the story that's going to make this really important for us to take action on now. And it's been seen in all of the EMS as a fundraising tool in their local communities. It won us the presidential award from the NAEMT. Barney and I were attributed for our work on the documentary, and that was in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. And it's still being seen a lot, and it's still not dated. There's some parts of it, small things, but not the whole problem. It's not gone away. And we still have a responsibility to change this. I also advocated through the Business Council and the state of New York, because New York is not a state that believes that it's an essential service. It does not give them that designation. It doesn't have a funding mechanism to pay EMS workers like the other parts of the three members of the 911 experiences, the fire department, police department, and there's EMS, but EMS doesn't have the support.
No.
And the union in the Bronx, who has really fought so hard to try to get these benefits, I remember one part of the story, and that's that they had people that were working for the EMS that were living in homeless shelters. So we pay garbage people more than we paid the EMS workers. Wow. Such a tragedy, such a travesty that we don't have enough advocacy for them. There's too many other things that are more important than these people who are life-saving on the spot. And that became such a passion project for me. But again, you go into these passion projects not wanting to earn a dime for them. Tom and I have talked about this before. People asking us to help them with different things. And it's hard because our hearts are big, but it's very difficult to afford to take on projects like this. But this was something that Bridie really worked really hard to get funding, as well as, and I helped with that, and also in getting the right pieces for it. I wanted to just address one quick thing, Richard, that you brought up. When you talk about autism, there's a lot of kids that are identified as having ADHD and they need to be on medication and all those different things that we've been going through as teachers and parents. And I think that's why I became a teacher. How do I teach literacy to kids and also teach history to children so that they can learn and be engaged? And a lot of that's multi-sensory. I was using kinetic sand to help them build iconic structures in history, like a dome or from all over the world, the different types of domes around the world.
Like Antonin Gaudi.
Or pyramids, those things.
Like Antonin Gaudi, that's how he did all of his architectural, using sand upside down.
And you can pepper in the facts. Once they have that sticky that pulls them in to be connected and engaged, then you can add information to that and help build their content knowledge.
Rich, that was an amazing story. You really grabbed our hearts on that. So what a blessing.
Can I just say something about Charles?
Sure. Yeah. Oh,
okay.
By all means.
I love Charles Kuralt, that's why I made a post on Facebook about him, because he really was, as Tom said, he was mentoring, he was a gentleman, he was very empathetic to almost everyone he met. He could tell their story in a very special way because he cared about his storytelling, and he was honest in his storytelling. And if you tried to pitch a story like that on the road, and when you're finding stories on the road, you're looking for all different kinds of people, all different kinds of economic levels. You're not singling out someone who's a celebrity because they're getting married at Madison Square Garden.
You're a forester.
I'm not referring to anyone in particular.
Was that Jeff? Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? I believe that he was an everyman. He really was a great reporter, great cadence, just genuine. He didn't have to be sexy looking. He was just a great writer and a great caregiver and journalist. He was just
kind of an extension of what Life magazine used to be, right? Where the photographers tell stories. He told it with words and stories. Yeah. What a great man.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah,
absolutely.
No, after he passed away 29 years ago, it's hard to imagine now, such a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we still appreciate what he did. So that says so much. And obviously they had a tribute on CBS and television, of course, and so on, and the memorial service, I think, at Lincoln Center that I attended. And when they asked his longtime cameraman, who was a friend of mine, you probably knew him too, Rich, Izzy Bleckman, legendary.
Yeah, Izzy, yeah.
And so they said, is there one story? And it's like, Kuralt and his team did hundreds of stories, obviously. Is there one story that really stands out that maybe you would be the most proud of or something? He said, there was this one time we just had this sharecroppers family in Alabama, basically living in a 2-room house or something like that. And the children, young adult children, had come back home. It was an African-American family. And the parents had somehow managed to send all the kids to college. It's like Izzy said, I was in tears as I was shooting that story. And that talks about the kind of meaning. So it's not celebrities. It's not senators. It's like that resonated with Charles and the team. And I can understand, that's
A lot of heart.
A lot of heart,
But
a
he
lot of
also liked those
optimism.
good donuts or cakes that he could find along the road and bring them back and share them with his news team.
I said, yeah, what I learned from Izzy and from Charles is if you're going to a city and you're going to be there for 3 days, you find a restaurant that you really like and you go there every single time, because life short to like, oh, that was a mistake.
It's and those nuggets that you find, along the way. That's beautiful. Tom, I think we're ready to steer the ship home. Yeah.
Rich, at the end of each episode, the way we've structured this, we touch on some stories that are in the news that we think are worthy of attention. I think of what you were telling us a few minutes ago about the people in power that do have responsibility. It's troubling when they're shifting our focus away to other things or being very self-absorbed. Great journalists have a sense of service and integrity. And that's what we'd like to see in our politicians. So our elected representatives, again, as we approach the 4th of July.
Yeah. So our first story is about the recent Trump 2025 disclosure, where the administration said he's a successful businessman, nothing more. But yet the disclosure shows at least $2.2 billion in revenue versus $622 million in 2024. Crypto accounts accounting for $1.4 billion of it. The figures nest, they don't stack. The White House says there's no conflict of interest and notes the president is exempt from federal conflict of interest law. So an interesting, when we look at these stories, Rich, we're looking at the fact that there's always two sides of the coin, something that you had said earlier. And as a journalist, we have to be willing to go there.
Yeah, shine a light on these. Listen, hold people accountable. Exactly.
You were going to say something, Rich?
I was just going to say that this man was elected. We knew he was a businessman. We knew that he was into brands and he brands himself. And that's part of his background as a businessman. That's who he is. And the only benefit that we get from that is that, and we talked about in his Federalist Papers, talked about presidents or executives that had ego and were bigger than life, that they could impact the country in a positive way if they were successful. So that's what we have to rely on, is that this president does the right thing for Americans, that he helps Americans. If they're not finding things affordable, he needs to make things affordable for them. Yep. If there's taxes that are too high, he needs to bring the taxes down. If our safety net isn't working and there needs to be more people included in that safety net, that needs to change. And if that has to start in Congress and get pushed to his desk, and that needs to be vocalized, it needs to be done. And as journalists, we could, if there's laws that aren't restricting his ability to make money as president, that needs to be, again, made clear. What's that law? Congressmen need to be on board. There needs to be a consensus of opinion that this is wrong, and that needs to help change what's there. But if short of that, if we're just going to scream at the TV set about it or scream at him, but not go through a legislative process, or there's no legal judicial process that can weigh in on that, then we have to make sure that the legislature implements laws that, but short of that, I don't believe that we should just sit on the sidelines and just scream things and get mad and not be part of a process to change things that we believe are wrong. If you're going to call it corruption, detail in to me all of the different things that are corrupt in the way this money was attained. And let's go through each one and see what we can do to bring about a positive response for the public. That's our responsibility as journalists. I think I've made myself clear. We have to be part of that change if we want to see that change happen. We have to be persistent, perseverant. We have to keep at it and just do our homework to make sure that we're getting it done in any way we can.
Your comment on Facebook, I spend a lot of time on social media, I will admit, and you mentioned your tribute to Charles Kuralt, and I can really feel the impact or how easy it is to become polarized myself. And I'll see this dig or this attack or something's like, it's so easy to press share and retweet and all that. And at one point, a few months ago, a friend said, Tom did, you retweeted that meme. I think it was, I said, did the president really put that out? And like, I had to ask myself, I don't know whether he really I just am polarized. So I pressed retweet. And I told myself, I can't be like that. So I like how you said, we can't just complain about things. We need to take a role.
Just think about that documentary. I could have just said, this is so wrong. I don't think this is right. And then that doesn't do anything. We have to be part of the change we want to see in the world. I'm sorry I stole that from Gandhi, but I also was in India and I spent a lot of time trying to help them raise money for their women's empowerment centers and also their fresh water. So those are things that if you care enough about them, you're going to be part of that change. If you want to sit on the sidelines and you're getting paid a nice big fat salary to just rip apart anyone that you want, and that's all you care about, we know who those people are. And should they deserve to be on the air? I don't know.
That's a good point.
All they're doing is poking the pig and criticizing and not coming up with solutions. That's not a problem solver. That's not a game changer.
Yeah, going back to when we're talking about the Newtown and the Sandy Hook shooting, the mom who I know, Scarlett Lewis, who still lives in Newtown, Connecticut, she faced off against Alex Jones in a courtroom. I never listened to the Alex Jones show. But again, he was one of them. Some saying it was fake. Those people are but even though, should a mom who experienced that tragedy have to show up in a courtroom and face this bully who stood up for herself, then she won a settlement. I don't know where that stands, but again, it's like he was held accountable.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
just as we have to hold Mangione accountable and not just celebrate how good he looks on camera. These are all things that I think that we have to be responsible as journalists to really pay attention to. Is what's our motivation? Are we trying to bring about a change, or are we just trying to get rating numbers here?
Good point. And but it's the number 2 on our list for 5 stories. We recently heard that Paula Reid is the first on-air person at CNN to say, I'm leaving, I'm not renewing my contract. We saw a number of those cases, obviously, at CBS News, as Skydance and under the Ellison family positions itself to acquire CNN. I don't know what I'm going to do if there are big changes there. I quite love CNN, I have to admit. But she's going, and again, I thought we were sharing with us earlier, Rich, was very interesting about, can you play a constructive role? Can you stand up for your stories, or just say, I see some hard times, and I'm not really criticizing. I don't mean to criticize her. I don't even know her. But it's like, I don't want to be part of whatever's going to be happening, and people move on. So that's a decision that on-air talent needs to make, and that was her decision.
Yeah. To me,
it's up to the individual. They have to see what they can weather through. Everyone's human. If I have a heart condition and I know that this is going to kill me, maybe I don't want to be in that job. It's a lot of things that you have to weigh. Is this going to impact on my family? Because it's adversely affecting me. You have to weather through that storm if you want to stay there and try to be part of the change over time. Because I really believe the truth does succeed in the end. I really do believe that love and honor and all of these great attributes do succeed in the end, but we have to be part of that. Maybe that group that doesn't give in and just stands tall and is resilient to whatever things come our way, and just, really pray. We need to all pray sometimes, because we're in a world that seems to be full of evil if we focus on just that evil. And believe that there are people out there that are caregivers and they do the right thing, and embrace those too. And maybe that's part of your appetite every day, is to read something about the people that are making a difference in the world, and then put that on your plate too, along with all the other selfish people.
The one thing that we do know is political parties come and go every 4 or 8 years, what it is, but the intelligence community, there's so many other components of the government that are apolitical. Our intelligence committees, the military, that they're there to observe the values that you said. That's uphold the Constitution, protect America, do the right thing. That's what it is to be American. And I think, again, putting your positive spin on this is, regardless of everything that happens, things will come and go, left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. We as Americans have to stick to our core values of seeking the truth, being kind to one another, accepting one another. And that's really what America's about. If you're left leaning and you don't like what's happening now, you can be an advocate, or you can wait your course, issue your vote, and maybe change things around next time.
And like little acts of kindness, little things that you can do that are really going to make a difference. It doesn't matter what political party you're in. If you're an activist and you do kind things in your town. I had a historical society in Chappaqua. They were losing money every year. They were always never had a fundraiser, at least not in recent years, that had made any money. So I suggested a train show, the Great Holiday Train Show, which was going to run from November to January. And it became the largest fundraising effort. And it started with my son and our trains. We set up ping pong tables, really crepe tops.
Oh,
on them,
you're
made them
bringing
look
back
beautiful.
memories.
What little things can turn into greater things if you put your effort into it and just don't give in to the naysayers that say, that's not a good idea. Nah, it's too much work, too much bandwidth. I can't do that. So you just have to really hold to something that's really important and special and just believe in the good things that you can bring forth.
You touched a number of times in this conversation on thinking about others, the EMS workers and so on, the people women in India. And it takes me back many.
Here's my Gandhi. He's always reminding me because he's sitting by me. This was given to me by a lama in India who really did service. Everything's about the other world. It's about people outside of yourself. That's what we do. And anything you can do to keep those reminders around that will keep you on track.
Yeah.
And if I don't like this, what am I going to do to be a part of that change or change the consensus on it?
Yeah, good point. I was just going to say when back in college, I majored in philosophy and ethics and justice and so on. And there was one or two authors who said true justice, the fairness and so on. We're talking about being kind is like creating, if we want to look at it even in a legislative way, it's creating legislation, creating a society so that whatever shoes you were born into, here we are, three white guys talking about these things. It's like we were, in some sense, we were blessed, to be spared some troubles and challenges that some people, marginalized people, have to deal with. So I'm conscious of that. It's like, well, for a leader, let's set up fairness so that whatever shoes we may be born into, others may be born into, where they don't experience suffering and they have the best.
Emory University, I took a course in how did the civil rights movement succeed? What were the things that they did that were successful? And one of the things that I read about the different tactics that they used is that here we're in Bull Connor is hosing down protesters that want to march. So what do? They wanted to have an event, but they had to get to know and help the police understand that they were human beings and get them to like them. So they had to be likable. In some of these civil rights activists got to know the police, got to know the law enforcement. And over time, and in meetings that were based on love and forgiveness and tolerance, they were able to get the message across. But the message is love. It's like, how do we get people to love other people and to respect other people and to appreciate their liberty and the right to freedom? Those all need to be reminded.
All you need is love, John Lennon. Yeah.
I know I sound like a...
What's
There's
our
a
next
lot-
story,
there's a lot.
Tom? Yeah.
Well, again, we talk about news personalities, and I'm sure you've had a front row seat to this, Rich. We, as viewers, and among the millions of viewers of the CBS Evening News or Good Morning America, or whatever the case may be, we feel like we get to know the people who are bringing us the world. Walter Cronkite, certainly. And for the past many months, one story that's been in the news, getting a lot of attention, is Savannah Guthrie's ordeal that she's been going through, the kidnapping of her mother, who even viewers got to know her mother as well, viewers of the Today Show. And so just one of the items on the radar screen for me as I look at what's happening in the world of news is that the FBI said some of these ransom notes, they believe are fake now. But I just have to give her and her family so much credit for playing. They were thrust into this horrible position. Newtown, who would ever wish to be in such a painful, horrible position? But they're playing it out with heart and authenticity. And maybe it's reminding us all of our common humanity, that we have more in common than we have different.
Yes.
Still thinking about Savannah Guthrie right now.
It's a painful experience for that family. It's visceral. You feel, your heart leaps out to somebody like that if you're that type of person. And you don't have to be that person. But she's a lovely person. She's a great anchor. She's loved by her colleagues and people that work for her say she's a great person. I think it's painful. It's hard to go through that. I just saw her open up on the set when a new piece of information came out. They all sat there and they seemed to let her speak. And she was also embracing the fact that this was a difficult thing for anybody to go through in her position. But she's a human first.
So another story that's gotten a lot of headlines is Australia, as we know, became the first country, I believe, to ban social media for under 16s. They've characterized that as the ban is working, and they're planning on doubling the maximum fine for platforms that fail to keep under 16-year-olds off. The ban took force in December 10th of last year, but by March, an e-safety regulator found that still 7 out of 10 children who had accounts that day were actually still on. So, is it working?
Well, I can speak to that as a teacher, because parents have to really manage their child's access to social media as best they can. But remember, they're only with them part of the day. And then teachers are with them another part of the day. And then they're by themselves without either of us. And we have to somehow help them understand in a way that has a conversation rather than it being talked down or a ban. Nobody likes bans. We always wanted to, and when we were young, we wanted to do whatever we wanted to do.
Right.
But these kids don't realize that their brains aren't fully developed. They don't understand that this is a practice that's habitual and it's time consuming. It pulls their focus. They aren't able to do the work that they need to do for themselves. So we have to somehow all team together and have a conversation on what needs to be done. Maybe they have suggestions on ways that they can self-regulate. I've tried to do that in the classroom where I collected the phones in the morning. I like activities that require them to have fun, and I used to do different kinds of games with them where they needed their phone to participate in an engaging activity that was history-filled, or even help them with their English skills. But it's a difficult process, and it needs careful attention by all people. If you're a teacher and you decide to have phones not available, and you're one teacher that teaches 2 classes, and the other teachers are like, you know what, I don't collect phones. It's too much trouble. You're not going to be part of the team, and you're not going to be part of the answer to resolve the problem. It's like what I said about consensus building about any story or change you want. You have to have everybody on board, or at least part of the dialogue and the discussion to bring about that change. You can't just arbitrarily say, this is a ban, you're not going to do this.
Great.
And people point to things like prohibition. All it did was force things underground, and people rebelled against that. It's the same thing with AI. AI was banned in a lot of public schools, and then eventually they realized you can't stymie people's curiosity. You have to, in some ways, and you know this as a teacher, Rich, you have to engage them, but teach them how to properly use it and use it in a positive way, and what the pitfalls are and how to avoid doing that. That's the role and responsibility that thankfully people like yourself take on, that we need more of, and more organizations like Kim Carr's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all the time about how we have to model correctly for them if we can. But we're just as habitual with our phones, and I need some information about this in my brain right away, so I'm going to Google it. I have to get this information. It's like, I have to get it now. And it's like that with kids. I was waiting to hear back from so-and-so. I need to check my text. It's like, because my life relies on that activity after school. These are things that are very important to them and to us, but it's distracting and taking them off task if they're supposed to be in a classroom of instruction. But there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to do within the classroom structure that needs some revision. And also the whole school day, I think, is the way it's structured. It's hard because kids lose their attention very quickly. And they kept saying, we'll just front load stuff in the morning. They're not eating, so they haven't eaten anything, so their brain wasn't working correctly. I mean, there's a lot of different people thinking about that, but maybe there's a dialogue, maybe there's a conversation Different kids need to be educated different ways. And you know that they're going to be successful, because I know some really great schools that are successful because they do things differently. And it can't be one size fits all. And how do I explain this? I'm just thinking in my head about something, but it does need to be reorganized. But if you have a structure in place that's not reorganizing itself, and it just keeps getting funded every year, and there's no impetus or effort to change because we're happy with our routines. But the routines, if they're not working or they're not successful anymore, and when it comes to literacy and kids being involved and being educated, there's something that we need to do to make that change.
Yeah. And we also need to be more inclusive. I brought up the autism point, the separation of the classroom. I've been part of some initiatives that are trying to create a consolidated, coordinated effort where kids who have where neurodivergent sit next to a neurotypical, and their engagement, they learn from each other, and that creates a much more harmonious experience in the classroom.
Those type of classrooms, I think, where you do have, I think we call them, they're not homogeneous. They're mixed, which is good, because I think that they're in many cases, yes, there are students that can help other students learn, and coming from another child is going to be more effective than a teacher sometimes for some of these struggling students.
Yeah.
But I think that's where you have to do engaging activities where you have groups that meet and talk and discuss and debate and do research, and each one has a different role, and then they alternate those roles so they all get different talents and different skills built. So those are things that you really need to think about in your classroom as a manager. Is how am I going to create an environment for learning where they're going to be successful in the end, meeting all the goals that we have. I tried chairs. I had little different kinds of chairs where they could rock in the chair, moving around, and the chairs where they could have a little bit of movement because they can't sit still. That doesn't help move their brain. So it's a lot of getting them up on an activity, to ride on the board or to walk or do something. Sometimes getting them out of their chair is a good thing. There's all these different strategies that we talk about and we think about. Like I said, with the kinetic sand, it's when you're feeling it it affects your brain in a different way. So then all of a sudden you're be more receptive to, that's a pyramid. That's this kind of pyramid. This came from Mesoamerica rather than from Egypt. There's all these different things that you can teach in that way.
The last item, and this is just one from out of left field perhaps, but it's something I noticed here in my community. I'm living in South Florida now, near West Palm Beach. And when I was a kid in South Florida, way back in the 70s, they opened a wild game park called Lion Country Safari. And they bought this property, and they said the rumor was, or the people are saying, they're going to build AI data centers. And it's like, we always have these issues over the decades, not in my backyard. And so with the explosive growth of AI, a lot of communities are wrestling with this issue about data centers and so on. So it looks like they're not going to pave over the lions and the giraffes and what have you. But again, it's, as you said, with education, new things come into the mix. It's like everything moves forward. Change is constant. It's more like, how are we going to engage with it? What decisions are we going to make? And let's do it with not like the top tier making the decision that's imposed on all the rest of us, but let's have it as a conversation. So that's just been on my radar screen where I live here.
My son lives in Vero Beach, and we have an apartment there where he is training as a pilot. He's going to be a commercial pilot.
Oh, wow.
That's what his goal is. Right over here behind me is something that he did at 6. He did a model plane out of wood. And I think of that. Where do those dreams start? When I was teaching 6th graders, I'm like, okay, I can be part of the change at an early time instead of waiting until 11th grade, which I love teaching, but they're already baked in by that time in many ways. But there's a lot of different things that we should be thinking about when it comes to those AI centers, and they are building them. And I think we're going through I want to say it's not a .com boom, it's maybe a .ai boom. And that will come to an end at some point. That boom will dissipate. And things will shake out, jobs will be lost, companies will go under, all those things will happen. And then we're stuck with all of these data centers. And what do we do with those? I heard somebody say that we should create them in space, centers in space.
That's what Elon Musk is doing. Yeah.
So, well, then we have all of this trash in the sky eventually, and then it just comes down and hits us. I don't know. Do we wait for it to hit us, or do we keep it where it is on the ground and try to manage it? There's a lot that needs to be taken into consideration in this. And I think that as much as you can be part of that protection of the land there's land trusts all over Connecticut. I've lived here now for 3 months, and there's farms after farms, and many of them are now land that cannot be built on. It's farmland, or it's for hay or for crops, but you cannot build a house or build condos there. We don't do that enough in Florida because my son says there's buildings popping up all over around him. So
Yeah.
that's got to change. That's going to be part of that discussion and dialogue.
I think we've touched on so many great issues and aspects of life as we head towards this. I can never even pronounce the word for 250th birthday of America, but this was a wonderful conversation. When I reached out to you to join us on True Journalism, I thought you'd be the perfect person to
Absolutely.
and thinking about young people and the
Well,
experience.
here's my flag. I'm a patriot. I believe in the 250. I'm going to celebrate our 250 every single day. You see, I have it on my website, the founders there, because I do believe in our core principles as a nation, and we should celebrate them. We should take a moment, whether we don't have to, maybe certain things won't fit for us, but other things can.
Yeah.
And we should pick which ones work for us and celebrate who we are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I
Sure.
certainly joined talking about our old friend Charles Kuralt. And I would say that Charles Kuralt believed there were extraordinary people on ordinary roads all across this country. And as the world gathers in Miami or New York or many cities around the United States for the World Cup, as we approach another Independence Day and the country's 250th birthday, the challenge, and I think Richie reminded us so well of this, the challenge for journalists is not only to expose what is broken, but it's to notice what's worth keeping and the constructive role that we can all play, the journalists and all of us.
And we can create the change from within. We can be part of that change from within, and outside we can be part of that change outside.
Yeah.
So you just don't give up. Just always believe that we have the ability, if we're with these right principles within us, to carry that forward in a good way.
And I also appreciate how you've reminded us to take an active role in finding those facts. And when you find them, you stick by them. You don't let others sway.
Yeah, advocacy is more than just about exposing the challenge. It's about taking steps to correct it or better it.
And where can people learn more about your work and everything?
My website is rpdmedia.com. So www.rpdmedia.com. That's my website. It talks about some of the things that we've stood for as a country. And it also has pieces that I've done over the years, anniversary pieces. It's a Wonderful Life. I'm an idealist. I do really like the shiny sun that's out there. And
so you're a Frank Capra disciple also.
But I don't think it was Capricorn. It was really believing in the positive and instilling those great, simple qualities and celebrating them so that we can mimic them. We can do them ourselves.
We need more people like Jimmy Stewart going to Washington and his values. Yeah.
My favorite film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Yes. Again, I love the lines. There's one, Mr. Lincoln had all of those people working against him too, and so do you. And now you have to stand up to them. So just when we think it's the worst time and that we're never going to be able to get out from underneath this, that's the time that you hang in there and be perseverant, because you can create change. You can make a difference in the world. Every little thing to large thing. Just keep your eye on the core reason why you need to be part of this change, not about whether I'm going to be celebrated for it or not.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know people will really enjoy this episode and will follow you, check out your writing and your video and all that. And let's close with our homage to another great CBS News alumni, Richard.
So to everybody, again, thanks to our guest, Rich Diefenbach. Good night. and good luck, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you. Romero.
Thank you all.